Step 3, this is a little bit of a convoluted slide, sorry about that. Violation is confirmed through physical evidence only, okay? Through observation of actual discharges in person, if we observe stains of wet pavement and it's obvious and that the alleged violator is still there, through pictures, video, through sampling, or a combination of these methods. These things are not typically enforced, or a notice of violation is not sent out solely through the report of a citizen. I just saw my neighbor dumping such and such, and we get out there, and if we can't find evidence, we cannot send a notice of violation to somebody. That has to be physical evidence. So the first step is, if we do confirm it, we will verbally tell that person, you are in violation because of X, Y, and Z. And we may hand them some educational materials, an environmental notice is what we like to call it, that explains the rules, explains things like separate stormwater system from sanitary sewer system and things like that. Okay, and then if it's the first offense and it's non-willful, like you didn't really know that it was something bad, and sometimes that's a judgment call. You weren't aware that that was bad, or if it was an accident, or and it's your first offense, we'll just issue a written NOV and require you to do some corrective actions, clean up the site, and tell us how you're going to comply in the future. If it's your first offense but it's willful, and this is not every time, but if it's especially a bad thing, and if you're a business and you knew about the rules, and especially if we have documentation that you may have obtained training or whatever, as a business owner, you have a responsibility to know what the rules are to a degree, okay? And if you do something really bad, and it's your first time and it's willful, we may issue a penalty on the first time. Or we may do what we do for a non-willful first violation and just issue an NOV, work with you to come into compliance, and always have to clean up your impacts. Restore it back to as close to the original condition of the environment as possible. Now, if you're a repeat violator, or if you continue to skirt the law and apply Band-Aid fixes, or just run around and not do what you're being asked to do, of course we will continue to write notices of violation, but we will issue a penalty in that case, and we have other enforcement remedies that apply as well. What does a notice of violation say? Well, of course it's going to describe the nature of the violation, what we saw, why it's in violation, and where we saw it, things like that. General description of enforcement remedies and penalties that may apply in that situation, so you're aware of what may happen, so you're not completely blindsided. It'll list or bullet point specific actions that you should take to correct the violation and restore impacted area, as well as list deadlines that you must do those things by. We will give you additional information on how to get in touch with us, so that you can call us up and say, I don't really understand, these are some of the circumstances, and we may, in some circumstances adjust that written notice of violation because you told us some additional information that we may not have known at the time. So we always give you some contact information, and we always require a written response explaining what corrective actions that you've taken. Monetary penalties. This is something that scares a lot of people, and I believe there are some myths out there surrounding it. Because a lot of times what we hear and read about are the big companies that get fined $1 million and people go to jail, and we hear about maximum penalties, okay? That's not always the case, and that's not to say that we issue small fines and you should be, you can violate whatever you want because we're not going to issue a big fine. No, we try to apply a penalty amount that's commensurate with the type of violation and how bad it is. We consider lots of what we call mitigating and extenuating circumstances, such as the degree and extent of harm that you caused to the environment. Was it willful? Did you try to take reasonable measures to comply? Did you maybe report it voluntarily if you messed up or spilled something? Prior record. These are all things that we consider We are not, another myth I think is that some regulators are very hard-nosed, technical, nerdy, egotistical, what have you, and that we're making these decisions behind closed doors, and we don't take these practical things into consideration, and that is not the case with me and many of my coworkers and Regina and Rusty. We're all pretty normal people, I think. Most of us. Rusty disagrees. He must be talking about himself. Okay. Larger penalties, the second bullet there, are reserved, how does this thing work, for bad violators, like really large volumes, really bad discharges, hazardous chemicals. And that's when we'll get closer to the maximum penalties. And I listed the maximum penalties. They vary in different localities. Yes, ma'am.
I think I didn't mention a while ago, but our penalties are different, and our maximum penalty is actually $25,000 per day. Mm-hmm. So I should mention that because I don't want people to walk away thinking that that's the only maximum.
Right. She's talking about the sanitary sewer use policy and their maximum fines. The state and federal EPA, their maximum fines are even higher. But I do want to get back to the really high, the myth, okay? The really high penalties are reserved for really bad stuff. But as Regina mentioned, our aim is to make penalty amounts consistent with the severity of the violation and make non-compliance more expensive than compliance, okay? This is my only little tongue-in-cheek funny part of the presentation. Other examples of other enforcement remedies: withholding. If you're in the building business and you have a building permit or trying to get a building permit or a certificate of occupancy or other type of approval from a local government, we can use that as a remedy and withhold that until you come into compliance. We have compliance agreements where we work with you to come to an agreement on how best to comply, so that we're working together to come up with the best solution. Compliance orders are usually reserved when we've tried other remedies and you're just not complying. Then we'll order certain directives for how we think you should comply, and that's usually on down the road in the enforcement trail. Cease and desist order, emergency relief. Those are when things are just really bad. There's maybe a serious environmental threat or public health harm, and there's a continuing sort of discharge, and we need to say, you just have to stop this right now. Those are reserved, and those are rarely used, but they're there if we need them. And then finally, injunctive relief, where we get the courts involved and bring you into court. Oh, geez. Oh, appeals. That was my last slide. Every enforcement case is appealable. You can submit an appeal form, and all appeals are heard by the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Stormwater Advisory Committee. It's made up of 9 citizens. They're appointed by city council, county commissioners, and town councils. And in the bylaws of Stormwater Advisory Committee, it spells out where the makeup and the geographic location of where those citizens are coming from. So it's not stacked with environmentalists, it's not stacked with industry people. It's very specific about where those people come from and what areas of the geographical areas they're coming from. So we have a very broad representation and of people that are hearing the appeals. So that's all.